thank you for everybody attending, and I'm sure people will be trickling in as time comes. I'd like to introduce you to our speakers today. We have Brian Beeler from StorageReview. He'll come and give his perspective, and I'll let him introduce himself a little bit later. We have Adam Morris from DataON Engineering, who's a customer. Adam also have deployed Azure Stack HCI and everything with the new iSeq platform. So that'll be a great experience and learning on his experience. But I think I'll kick it off by saying the fact that, hey, it's been a exciting 2 years, and it seems like everything is coming back to normal, at least from my engagement with customers, business. But however, the shortages has not helped anybody. It's been challenging managing getting the product to our customer who wants it, and we'll continue to manage that process. But we'll talk about it throughout this discussion for about an hour. So Brian, why don't you do a quick intro, then we'll pass it to Adam.
Sure. Hey guys, Brian Beeler here. I'm the proprietor of StorageReview.com. Despite the name, we cover everything in the enterprise IT stack, including racks, power conditioning, switching, server storage, hyperconverged infrastructure, which is of course where we've spent a lot of time with the team at DataON, and then a little bit of client computing. But we've got a lab here in Cincinnati where we're based. We've got I guess we've got 8 racks now of gear that is only about 20% ours. The rest is all transient. So when we work with DataON, for instance, they'll send us a cluster and we'll rack it and stack it just like any other organization would, and then run our benchmarks and go through the testing. So we're extraordinarily hands-on, and that happens to be a good bit of affinity with DataON, since they're very open to us being exploratory with their gear. In full transparency, the broader IT vendor marketplace is not necessarily so open. So, take that for what you will, but DataON's been great to work with over the last couple of years. We were out on site with them last week, getting caught up on all the new stuff. And we've got a ton of content, if I can get shameless plugs in while I'm here. A lot of great content coming out, both videos on YouTube that we've started to publish already, including a MUST Pro demo we did with Henry, and a hardware overview of the new integrated systems with Rocky. But we've got an update from Cosmos on Azure Stack HCI 2H21 that we'll be publishing soon. Did that as a video podcast, and we'll be writing up something on Howard's or DataON's nodes too. So we've got a ton of stuff. If you're interested in this category specifically, just keep an eye on our socials or our publishing list. We've got a bunch of content coming.
Awesome. Adam?
Yep, I'm Adam Morris. I work for DEC. We're an engineering company in Texas. We've got about 7 offices, and we're not a large company. We're about 250 people or so. But we do have a small data center in our corporate office in Houston. We ran a DataON old 9220 cluster in a box system with 3 nodes. We had about 50 to 60 virtual machines running on those nodes. Since then, we've actually reduced our VM count by about 50%. So we're down to about 30 servers, and we decided on Azure Stack HCI with DataON because it was the most cost effective. We looked at multiple systems, SANs, NASs, other Nutanix. We looked at Nutanix as well, and we just determined everything was too expensive for us. It did too much. We just didn't need it to do all that super high level enterprise stuff. So we decided to go with DataON and the new Azure Stack HCI. This was when it was brand new. I mean, it just came out. Actually, I think while we were talking, it wasn't even GA yet, right, Howard? So
yep.
Yeah. So we've since migrated. I'll probably give more information later on in this discussion, but we've since migrated. The performance is really good. We right-sized it, so that's good for the DataON team. They helped us out with that, and things are going really, really well now. I'll explain a little bit more about the migration and everything kind of later on.
Thanks, Adam. We're looking forward to sharing your experience. Why don't we kickstart the discussion with Brian? Brian, you were here last week thank you for coming out, flying all the way from Ohio to Anaheim, California. I'm very happy to host you for a couple of days. I think in your experience, you saw DataON, who we are in our office. You went to the back, talked to our engineers. You were in the office here looking at different systems and solution and their demos. What was your overall thoughts between the new platform with the new Intel Xeon Gen 3 Ice Lake and also the new Azure Stack HCI? And can you share some of your takeaway with us, maybe as a way to kickstart a discussion?
Yeah, sure. I mean, at a high level, for the perceived size of DataON as a company, the amount of activity you guys have going on is pretty amazing. So Howard's right. You know, we were there, Kevin and I. Kevin runs our lab for Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday last week. And we started out and we had an agenda to get through and had an interview with Cosmos that I referenced, had from Microsoft, had some people at Intel and all this great content that we were creating. But in between, we kind of had free reign of the place, which is not good for for most people that have a couple storage infrastructure nerds snooping around. And I went back in the back and hung out in the lab and hung out with the receiving guys and just sort of watching what was going on and asking questions. And the amount of gear, and so maybe some of you have ordered this with DataON, that's come in and they take it and they rack it and they do the burn-in testing and then they box it back up and they get it out to the customers. Just the sheer amount of gear coming in and out of that place was really impressive and exceeded my expectations. So just from a scale standpoint, that's one thing. The other that I think is really big is we were focused on these new integrated systems and what is going on with DataON on these Intel platforms and all the storage options that are available is really pretty special and is not something that you commonly see. Again, and Howard, not to be disparaging, out of a smaller vendor. I mean, this isn't Dell, this isn't Cisco, this isn't HPE. And maybe to Adam's point, that's part of the reason why they found them to be so cost effective, because they don't have the Dell, Cisco, HPE margins and the cost structure built in. But the creative work from a software standpoint, and I think Howard will probably get into it today a little bit, the MUST Pro software is really pretty special from a infrastructure management standpoint. And just generally what they're doing with the Intel partnership and being able to leverage that to bring these really great nodes and technology, be it CPUs or storage or persistent memory if you want that, or Optane, you know, whatever you want. Most companies the size of DataON don't have that capability and don't have that support from their partners. So, you know, we talk with everybody in the industry, and a lot of companies make a lot of claims, but when we probe deeper into why, which is always my first question, you know, I'll get some marketing message that our stuff is great for AI workloads, and I'll say why, and there's never any answer there. There's no depth. So with these guys, when I say why or how, there's normally a really competent answer behind that. So, you know, I think it's a pretty special company, and you know, really for the 15 of you or so that are on right now, and whoever watches this after the fact, it's pretty cool. And the culture and philosophy and capabilities are all a big reason why people are doing business with them. And you know, like Adam was saying before, and he'll tell us a little bit more about his journey. I think there's going to be a lot more that want that sort of hands-on touch, that will do anything philosophy to make you, Mr. or Mrs. Customer, happy. That really came through in our visit last week.
Hey, thanks, Brian. I appreciate coming out. And yeah, that's a good segue to Adam. I think it's the journey, right? You're not a first time. You're an IT pro. You've been doing this a long time. You've seen a lot of different technology. I would love you to share your experience and journey of how you come about today, really adopting the new technology of Microsoft Azure Stack HCI, how you made that choice. Sure. I'd love everybody to hear what you have to say.
Sure. So, you know, Howard knows us. We've been a customer since 2012, 2011, 2012, something like that. We deployed one of the original cluster-in-a-box systems I think they came out with. At that time, we were migrating away from VMware because of the cost. So we have a Microsoft Enterprise Agreement. We were already licensed for Windows operating systems, server operating systems. We even had data center licensing already. So we thought, why not? Let's try to get on the Hyper-V train. So we did, and we realized real quick that it was perfect for our business. It may not be perfect for everybody's business, but it was perfect for ours. It was simple. We already knew the Microsoft kind of way of doing things, so we just kind of, forklifted it in there and got it going. We migrated all of our VMs. It was a relatively easy process. So, 8-9 years later, the system has been running perfectly. We've replaced one hard drive, and our first SSD drive to fail was 2 weeks ago, which we replaced with a brand new SSD, Howard. I just replaced it the other day, and it repaired and came right back online. So I have another story to tell you about that later. So we decided to go with Azure Stack primarily because of the cost, number one. Nutanix was too expensive. We really liked Nutanix, but they were just, it was too much. The other reason was we knew Hyper-V already. We didn't really have to learn an entirely new system from the ground up. So it was easier for us to do that. And the biggest hang-up has been the migration. Microsoft being Microsoft, they don't always provide all of the tools necessary in order to go from one product to another. They've gotten a lot better at that, but it wasn't quite there going from a 2012 R2 cluster to the Azure Stack platform. So anyway, back to Howard's point, we chose them because of those two reasons primarily. Plus, we already had an existing relationship with DataON.
Hey,
yeah,
Adam, let me ask you a question. Sorry to interrupt you. And for everyone else watching, this is entirely unscripted. I'm just interrupting Adam because I think he's onto something interesting. Hey, so something I noticed when I was out last week is that you're talking about your journey. And one of the things that you didn't say explicitly, but I captured just in the way you were communicating it, is that you wanted to check out Hyper-V. You had the licensing. And when you want to go to Azure Stack HCI specifically, before it was kind of like a checkbox feature of server, not really a solution into its own. And I don't know if you've noticed this, but from my standpoint, now that there's the Azure Stack HCI OS, and you may not even have even touched it in this way as a customer, but the install of the OS is so much different than checkboxing a server feature. And it's such a small thing, but a lot of what you're talking about, I think, is a philosophical change at Microsoft, or at least a maturity at Microsoft, where they said, okay, well, this HCI thing with Hyper-V is cool, and some people are checking it off and using it, and DataON and a couple others are selling it in a converged solution. But what if we really went HCI first in the architecture? And that's something that they've done, and I think makes a really big difference in the way that Howard and DataON team can deploy it on the hardware, so that when you get it as a customer, it's my expectation, and you tell me if I'm wrong, is that when you stand that thing up for the first time or turn it on, that it's ready to go, and it's a much more of a HCI experience than managing a server experience. Is that the case?
Yes, I would agree with that. So that was once we actually decided to go with DataON and the Azure Stack, some of the features about Azure Stack really got us kind of excited. So one of the old problems, I don't know how many people here are running Hyper-V clusters right now. One of the old problems was cluster aware updating just did not work very well or at all. Okay, the stars and everything had to align perfectly in order for it to work properly. Well, with the Azure Stack, so much easier. It actually works, and I can vouch for that. We're running it. We've done it multiple times, multiple months in a row. We've done hardware updates, driver updates, and OS updates. it actually works. So that was huge, right? The other thing is, it is essentially Windows Server stripped of everything else that can go wrong, and, right? And it's just Hyper-V with the Azure Stack OS. So that was real. That was a real attention grabber. Once we found out some of those things, we're like, oh, okay, so Microsoft is finally getting with it and targeting specific use cases and saying, okay, we're gonna take Windows Server, take out all of the crap, and just give you what you need to run your hypervisors, and that's it.
Well, that's what you want too, is
Exactly.
sort of a minimum level of orchestration to manage and to keep current and update, and then spin your VMs, and they are whatever they are. I mean, CentOS or Windows or, you know, who cares at that point? And you can manage those VMs independently and back them up and do all the other stuff you want to do. But yeah, I think that change in terms of OS is a big fundamental change. And the other big thing too that I noticed, and I don't know if you guys are doing it yet or considering it, but in my talk with Cosmos at Microsoft, I said to him, Cosmos, I went through all the blogs for the last 8 months. It was a long airplane ride from Cincinnati to Anaheim. And I'm looking for common threads of looking at the blogs to see what it is that you guys are really pumped up about. And their Kubernetes, their AKS integration is something that they're punching out once a month updates on, and really trying to drive the message of containers and container capabilities home. And I'm not sure, like I said, if you're using that or not, or following the container space at all, but it seems like there's a really serious concerted effort to give you a Azure public cloud feel on-prem, or if you're doing the hybrid thing with the container services. Have you explored that at all yet?
So we haven't. We're not using Kubernetes or containers or anything like that. We're pretty basic. You know, we're just a on-premise server client environment. We are going to be exploring the using Azure to do our Azure site recovery with Azure Stack. That'll probably be next year. One of the things I'm not 100% sure on is the cost. So we've got to really do some research on the cost of using that as a kind of a DR scenario. So, you know, one of the things, and I'll go back to it, one of the reasons why we chose Azure Stack DataON was because we're not a true enterprise company. You know, we don't have 10,000 users and an entire, you know, 1,000 square foot room full of racks and servers and everything else. We have one cluster. It's a 3-node cluster. We've got 60 terabytes of space. You know, fairly simple. And Azure Stack does that perfectly. It is made for simple. So if you're looking to simplify kind of your cluster environment for your hypervisors, Azure Stack is the way to go. It's definitely the way to go.
Yeah, it's funny you say simple. I think a lot of customers, as they talk to us and do their research, you know, they learn that, you know, their environment doesn't need to be that complex. They want to run their VMs, they want to run their workload, they want to run their SQL workloads, and how can they do that simply, easily? And I think one of the direction that Microsoft continue to have innovate is let the admins and IT manager and director focus on their apps. Don't let them worry about infrastructure, right? And I think the direction of this Azure Stack HCI OS with different tier integrated system, where Microsoft is really taking the lead on supportability along with DataON. Microsoft, along with DataON, is ensuring that the constant test of these hardware releases. Microsoft is continuing to say, we want to make sure the experience of the customer is good. It's a change. It's a huge change from what we have experienced, even at DataON, for the last 10 years since we made the Microsoft choice. And I think that's one of the key drivers that people continue to understand why enterprises, small medium enterprises, is choosing Azure Stack HCI Microsoft as an opportunity, right? But I think the direction is good. Still a lot of work to do to get the word out to all the enterprises. Believe it or not, when I was at the event last Sunday, there was I talked to probably 150 people. I would say good 75% still is VMware. And I would say 90% has no idea what I'm talking about, right? But it's just the reality. It's okay. It's just the reality of it. But that's the world we live in. We have a great technology, but we need to do more to spread the words.
So Howard, I wanted to touch base on two other things. One is Windows Admin Center, and the kind of going off of that is your MUST Pro. So Windows Admin Center is essential to the management, monitoring, and administration of Azure Stack HCI. It's possible to connect Cluster Manager and Hyper-V Manager to Azure Stack HCI and do a lot of your management tasks like you always had been doing before. But Windows Admin Center has been kind of I don't want to really call it a revelation, but it has really simplified the overall management of the system. It took us a little while to really get used to it, to be honest with you. There are more ways to manage it through WAC and Azure Stack HCI than there was previously. So if you take WAC and you connect it up to a 2012 R2 cluster, you're not going to get all the same features and tool sets that you do with the new stuff. So you don't really get to see that until you actually turn on the Azure Stack cluster and get it connected and start managing it. And then the MUST Pro add-in for that is what makes it kind of really somewhat automated. So the update process is virtually a next deal. And we've gone through that. We did have a few just issues on our side because of our environment getting WAC set up. So you have to pay very close attention that WAC is set up properly and is able to communicate and do everything you need to do. There were permissions and things that we had to do in Active Directory to make it work. So just make sure you pay attention to that. But MUST Pro, once you get that going and it's working, it checks for your Azure Stack updates first. You select which ones you want, you hit next. MUST Pro comes up, you can check for hardware and driver updates. You select those, you hit next, and then it installs them. And it reboots the nodes, it migrates your machines, brings it back up, migrates the machines onto the other nodes. It actually worked. And to be honest with you, me and my team, when we first did it, when it actually first worked, we were like, holy blank, you know what? We couldn't believe it worked.
It makes a big deal, a big difference in these integrated systems, Adam. I think you're definitely onto something because, again, that's the kind of tool that you might find at the big guys like Dell or HP or whatever, right? Or Lenovo, because they've got 100 engineers sitting there to go create software. The fact that DataON could bring that through in this latest generation, along with all the upswing with Intel 3rd Gen Xeon, all the capabilities that brings along, Gen 4 storage, et cetera, to manage all of that through MUST Pro and is strong, and it makes a big difference. And you've seen that a little bit already, which is pretty cool.
I think this is a good segue to Henry. Henry, do a quick 2-minute demo on MUST Pro, just so the audience can see it. Henry, you want to do that real quick?
Sure. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, loud and clear, Henry.
Let me, and then make sure you can see my screen.
Yeah, looks beautiful.
Okay. So let me jump to, so basically this is a YouTube video of MUST Pro that my colleague put together. But what I'm going to do is jump to sort of the key sections of this, so you get an idea, and certainly you can go check out the full video yourself. So it's on our YouTube channel. So let me jump to okay, so this is our MUST Pro. So the first thing is that this is going to be inside the cluster manager of the Windows Admin Center, and you'll see that right now we have 2 servers, and they're basically a AZS server, direct connect to each other. But in terms of the connectivity, that really doesn't matter. It's MUST Pro basically is for our integrated systems. So to the next part is that you go to the update section, which normally in a typical Windows environment, that's just updating your OS. But what they have done, Microsoft has done, is to add a hook in there that for vendors like DataON, you say, hey, we'll check the OS updates first, and then we'll then pass the baton to DataON, and then have our software check the system for updated drivers and firmware and all that kind of stuff. So basically, you go through the update section, and first thing is you check for updates for the Windows, and in this case for the video, basically we basically had no updates. Now it takes you to the hardware section. So Microsoft, you can see DataON and Microsoft. So now engineered to basically now can check for drivers and firmware updates. So you get updates. Basically starts going through the process of inventorying your system and check to see what versions they are. And so then you'll see that in this view that we had like a Mellanox driver and firmware that needs to be updated. You can see that in the column here. Basically, this is our tested, validated version, and these 2 nodes are currently on a version prior to that. So basically, what we can do is select these to update. So you can either install the selected updates or install all the updates that are relevant to your system. And then basically kick it off. You do the install, and then there's a little button down here to do the install. And then so basically it starts the process. And then once it's done, one thing that you have to keep in mind is that this is leveraging the Microsoft update process. So basically what it's trying to do is to do all the updates all at once. So the Windows updates and the hardware and firmware updates, and then do one reboot for each node. So what happens is that you will, in the background, it will drain the node. So all the VMs that are on that first node will get drained and moved to node 2 in this instance. The ownership of the volumes will be moved to node 2 as well. And then it will reboot. And then once it reboots, it will move the resources back, and it will do the storage job to get all the data in sync again. And then it will move on to node 2, do the same thing, drain everything, and then reboot and then bring it back up. So that's basically what happens in the sequence of things to get all your updates done for your cluster. So hopefully that helps.
Hey Ryan, you had a question. Thanks for joining. It's been a while. How's Wisconsin?
We're doing great. Minneapolis, so real close to the border, but yeah.
Minneapolis, that's why I was there. I still remember. So I actually saw an email coming in from you. Are you 19 right now? Is that what you're running?
2019, yeah.
19.
Yeah, 2019's core.
Yeah. So a couple clarification just so you know where we're at. So Azure Stack HCI OS is a brand new OS from Windows Azure services, $10 per core. Microsoft decided to productize that product separately as an OS. So essentially, you could run your entire cluster today without not the window. Window is for the Hyper-V piece of it. One of the key features which we talked about today, just now, is the ability for you to update your firmware, BIOS, driver on the hardware side using cluster-aware update orchestration. So what you have done before, BMC, do the tools, all that goes away. Everything goes in the background and does the update and allows you to do that entire process. But for you to do that, you need to run the new Azure Stack HCI OS for us to hook into, right? So for Windows Server 19, We're not there yet. Even though it is a DataON software, we need to hook it into that particular OS to make it work, right? So for me, that's kind of where we're at. But for sure, what you have today could work in the new OS as well. Because remember, I say this always with a pride. These are commoditized server. There's nothing special about it. I think you have a 4-node, 16 bay, right, or something like that, as I recall, right? That same server, actually, believe it or not, has been qualified for the new Azure Stack HCI OS already. Same server, right? So you're not you're on Xeon Gen 2. I think it's been what, 4 years since you bought those, maybe?
Yeah, 3, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think we should go back and take a look at it. If the new OS is something that you believe, based on listening to Adam and Brian, then now you have the option to use that feature because now I can enable it for you, right? So just so you know, it's not like you have to go buy new gear, all that. It's a software on a commodity hardware. Long as we knows exactly what the hardware is, how to do the update on BIOS firmware, it is something that's possible for your existing gear, long as it's the gear that we have validated and certified.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, I want to make sure I clarify that. It is exciting. It is a huge pain off the back of a lot of admins, which we know, but it is something that we found very, very compelling, and we spent about a year engineering to make sure everything works.
Yeah, those Intel BIOS updates are, I'm not sure who's making those, but they're not fun.
Yeah. Are your cluster running?
Oh yeah.
It took a while. I think about a year and two before you got to it, but I'm happy now it's running and everything's working well. Thank you.
Oh, yeah. Thanks. It's run great.
Brian, I want to also get a feel of it. You know, you came here. You also did some discussion and tests on the new platform. As you guys all know, the new Intel made a transition to the new Xeon Gen 3 processor family. They announced it in April, and DataON essentially has transitioned all our infrastructure platform to the new server. We have new server OSs, we have new chassis, everything's PCI Gen 4. Finally, they caught up to AMD. So the SSDs, the adapter cards, everything's PCI Gen 4. Brian, from your point of view, what do you think are the key difference that customers should make sure they transition to the third gen platform? What are the benefits?
Well, I mean, the obvious benefit is Gen 4, and you know, look, cores and clock are good too, and it really depends on your workload. And actually, we should come back and talk about the Y CPUs at some point. So I shamelessly posted a link in the chat to our MUST Pro demo that we did, but there's also a video or two before that, the one that Rocky and I did where we're talking about the hardware. The CPUs you guys use mostly are the Y CPUs, which are tunable for workloads. So that's pretty cool at a sort of fundamental layer, so that customers don't overspend on licensing for cores that they're not going to use, or maybe you want more clock or less clock and a lot of cores, whatever. So a lot of tunability there, but the Gen 4 piece is really the one from a performance standpoint that makes all the difference. Now, we haven't published our numbers yet on the work we've been doing with DataON on the new cluster, but we have a 3-node setup with only 5 drives in each. So there are 5510s, Intel Gen 4 SSD, real nice mainstream 1 drive write per day kind of drive. So very much the Intel bread and butter. And we're getting like 4 million IOPS out of that cluster. And that's, talking to Cosmos, probably more than 1 million IOPS than what we would have gotten out of a similar config in Gen 2, maybe 1.5 million. And that's just, I mean, that's 5 drives in 3 nodes. We could have 24 drives in each of those nodes and start to saturate CPU or network links or whatever. So I think at a real fundamental level, from a performance standpoint, Gen 4 makes all the difference. And for fun, what we did then is we took those 3 nodes and installed ESXi, VMware, and then vSAN, and we ran some of the same tests again. And we'll have those numbers out very shortly, but the Azure Stack HCI capabilities in terms of just raw performance, maybe 8 to 10 times faster in some workloads. So we'll share that, but it's quite amazing. And I think you go back to some of the stuff that Adam was talking about. Like, what do we really need at the end of the day? Do we need all the features and capabilities that are in Nutanix or vSAN? I don't know, maybe you do. And in that case, then perhaps Azure Stack HCI isn't the best fit. I don't think Howard and their team want to jam this thing into places where it's not going to be successful. That said, though, the capabilities that are there now from the hardware standpoint, and I think DataON, I could be incorrect, but I believe DataON's the first to ship Intel Gen 3 Ice Lake in an integrated system like this for Azure Stack HCI, which is pretty cool too. They're able to be pretty nimble with that Intel partnership. But the performance that's there, the hardware, the capabilities that are there, anyone that just needs a small cluster for remote office, I don't know, if any of you guys are in retail or some other professional setting where you might have a couple locations where you want to have this stuff out there, you could put 2 nodes out there with a couple drives in each to meet your capacity requirements and get more performance than you could ever use. I mean, it's really that remarkable. So, I mean, that's the kind of stuff that stands out to me from a capability standpoint. And that's not even addressing what's coming in 2H21 from Azure Stack HCI, which is going to open up a ton of new capabilities. And it starts to get, I don't even know them all, but we talked a little bit on a podcast that'll drop later this week or next week. We talked with Cosmos about it. And the one I'm pretty pumped up about is GPU support. So now we'll be able to take T4s or V100s or A100s and put them in all of the nodes in a DataON Azure Stack HCI cluster and run these really popular, especially at the edge, inference, video monitoring types of AI and ML workloads. And look, I mean, even if you're not doing it in the data center yet, even if you're not doing Kubernetes yet, Microsoft is really catching up on a lot of these key features that 100% won't use them, but maybe 15 or 20% want these capabilities, and it's a big fundamental win. And then on the hardware side, you need hardware that supports it. So those Intel servers, again, going back to the power that's available in Gen 3, Intel Xeon, the Ice Lake CPUs, and then all the storage capabilities. I mean, there's just a lot of options there. And we're working on the 2U nodes, but there's 1U 12-bay nodes that are part of this integrated systems, as well as 3.5-inch centric nodes if there's someone that has a capacity or more of a hybrid type environment that's available too. So a lot of cool stuff, a lot of options, and I'm equally as excited about what's there today as to what's coming next. And for us, we're starting to map out some of that test plan now in terms of how do we engage with some of these new features and capabilities. Adam had mentioned ASR, or site recovery. That's another one that is just kind of there. And yeah, there's the question about cost and what does that mean? But Microsoft's done a pretty good job of putting out features that are usable and functioning, which isn't always the case in enterprise IT. A lot of things get announced and never shipped, or announced and never work. But there's a lot of cool stuff that the hardware enables, but is very much part of this ecosystem play.
That's absolutely correct, right? I think this hybrid connectivity positioning that Microsoft's taking has really differentiated themselves because they only have Azure. But going back to Adam, I think a lot of customers here, actually, if I look across the customer today, there's probably 3 or 4 of them are still on the sideline looking at Azure Stack HCI, believe it or not. And I guess for you to now deploy the introduction running everything. What would you say are some of the key takeaways you would share with your fellow admins? What are some of the considerations they should think about to kind of look into this technology?
Well, that's actually a hard question, Howard. So I guess one of the things you would need to look at is, what is necessary in your environment? Kind of going back to what we were talking about. Do you need, all these fancy features that a Nutanix or somebody else might have? Or do you need to be able to, replicate a SAN to a SAN at an offsite location or something like that? Do you need a very specific set of features in order to, make your business go? If you do, then, just figure out if Azure Stack has those features. If they don't, then you probably need to look at something else. But if you're looking at, being able to fit into what Azure Stack offers right now, because we all know they're going to offer more. They're going to keep building and building and building on top of this. Like, this is just literally the beginning.
Yep.
I don't even think it's been GA for a year yet. So yeah, so I mean, they're going to keep building and building. I think they started out with something very good and competent that people can actually use that's functional. And that was one of the main reasons why we chose it. So I would say look at your feature set, look at your budget. Those are probably going to be the two biggest primary factors. And both of those fit for us. So not to mention all the extra stuff, we like Howard, and DataON is a good company to be around. And by the way, their support is top notch. Anytime I've ever had a problem, I just reach out. Ben Milborn's on the call. He's been great. Howard's been great. Jeff's been great. They all have been really, really good with getting us through some of this Azure Stack stuff because it was so new. We had to work out some issues, but that was just because it was new. We kind of expected it, to be honest with you. So once we worked through it, it's been just an absolute dream so far.
Hey, that support issue is an interesting one, and I think that's another big part of the integrated systems, the new ones, the AZS systems that DataON has. As from my standpoint, we never really work through a traditional support matrix because Kevin breaks something and then he calls one of these guys direct and says, "Hey, I might have deleted something. Can you help me out?" So we don't normally see the customer-facing support. But Howard, you were telling me about sort of I don't know if it's a new or renewed or updated support system with Microsoft, where you guys are sort of co-managing tickets now, which I think is kind of a big deal because in the past, anyone that's had to deal with support on the Microsoft side, especially for the early days, and you probably found this too, Adam, that the early days of support for Azure Stack were pretty shaky, I think. But now this sort of integrated ticket system that DataON has with Microsoft should change that experience for the much, much better.
I think the key is Friday, 1 a.m. while I'm playing poker and smoking cigar and drinking whiskey, I get a text or an email that says, "I'm down." Trust me, that's not only one time. I've been on many of those. I'm down. My cluster's down. And DataON support guys will jump on, will email back. So how can we help? Then, if it's a Microsoft issue, then customer typically, if they want to get their attention, has to have a premier support, right? Premier support. You have to reset premier support. If you have a standard ticket, they'll say, "Hey, do you have a server that could power up?" Like some stupid questions that people hate, right? But with the new Azure Stack HCI OS, for $100 a month of support, there's a brand new team that sits within Azure that's dedicated to Azure Stack HCI support. So if you raise that ticket, or we raise that ticket, doesn't matter who it is, because we're integrated system, there'll be someone on the call with you very fast. Not in a second, but fast enough where they could go, and these are not tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, keep on escalating. These are the people that knows the technology, that's working on Azure Stack HCI. They're dedicated. I think Microsoft claimed there's 8 people. However, right now I only saw 2. So I'm not going to vouch for that 8 yet because I only got 2 names right now. But they're on there and they go, hey, I know Azure Stack HCI. How can I help? If there's a, DataON's on there, it's a hardware, we've helped fix it. If it's a software, they help fix it. Just to me, it's a peace of mind that I know that my closest partner is right there with me to help the customer. To me, that's what keeps me up at night. Closing the deal, selling the thing, they're great. But you know what? At the end, it's the Adams, it's the Ryan, it's the Tim that really drive DataON business. Because if we don't do a good job, trust me, no one's going to come back. We cannot be in business for 30 years if we do a shitty job on supporting our customer, because that's not our value, and we thrive on making sure we help our customer the best. And Microsoft really has enhanced that experience a lot by having this integrated support with DataON.
Hey, Howard, Sean's asking in the chat about if that means that Microsoft wants to be more involved with the HCI hardware. And I think that's kind of a good conversation about this integrated ticketing solution. Where is it that DataON would go to Microsoft for more support, or how, if it got to Microsoft first, would they bring in DataON? Just how does that relationship work? Do you have any more color into that?
Absolutely. Regardless whether or not is a hardware, a software, a solution issue, by you having an integrated system, you pick up call and call either parties, and both parties obligated to engage. If the party A, that's Microsoft, looked at it, go, I think there's something challenging with the hardware drive, let me get DataON on board, and they'll essentially transfer the ticket to DataON, DataON comes on board. If DataON is the first call, usually we're the first call, and we say, here's the software stuff that I can't really help you, because we know a lot about Microsoft OS, believe it or not, compared to everybody else, right? We can solve most of the stuff, but if we can solve it and we need that peace of mind, we don't want to touch it, we just do a ticket transfer and Microsoft gets on board, right? So either way, it's a joint support mapping that Microsoft has committed to make it happen. And I think that, again, it makes my life, and as a close partner that depends on Microsoft, very happy, because we know that they got our back the whole time. And clearly Sean's on the fence, right? He's been on the fence for what, a couple years now, Sean? And you're still now thinking hard about this thing. So today's job is to convince Sean, are you really ready to move from VMware to Hyper-V? And how can the 15 customer convince you on this call?
That's a good summary, yeah.
And just so you know, I got one of your question answer. John Marlin, who it was a stretch cluster PM or a failover cluster PM, he was on, he had to take off. I made fun of him. I said, hey, we have a customer talk about Azure Stack Hub, and I told the customer it's dead. And he actually said, no, it's not dead. He said you'll hear more in a couple of weeks on some of the other stuff they will do on Azure Stack Hub. So it looks like they're going to renew their engagement at the Hub side of it. So if that's something ultimately is something that you have to use, then I think you will have option too. All transparency, that's what he said to me on this call.
Thank you.
Yeah. I think for me also is that, as we go down this journey with Microsoft, I think Brian alluded to, 21H2 is around the corner, guys. It's literally weeks from announcement, right? Ignite's coming up November 2nd, and I could see the roadmap that Microsoft's putting down. They're really are putting a lot of new feature coming in, every half year drop, every year drop. And by having this subscription model that Adam has, all the new features just gets pushed down. You already, there's no, I don't have to buy another Windows Server license 2022, 2024, 2016. It's a service, right? They just push the feature down and you got it, right? So to me, for many customers, it's a model they want. They don't want to continue to buy licenses. They don't want to pay the $10. But it really depends on the environment. And I agree with you, Adam. It's really what fits you. And VMware has a lock in many enterprises, to be honest. And you got to get a good feel about Hyper-V as well. But the Azure Hybrid feature has really helped many customers reconsidering Azure Stack HCI. And Matt, by the way, we shipped your system after 4 months yesterday. Sorry it took 4 months.
It brought a tear to my eye, Howard. Thank you, man. Very excited about it. Very excited.
Blame Ben. Do not blame me. Ben is totally responsible, but we shipped it.
I always blame Ben anyway, so it's all good, man.
Thanks, guys.
Sean, do you have any question for all the experts? We have a lot of customer expert here. And do you have any question for these guys? This is really a great chance to get the first view from all these people that has live workload running Azure Stack HCI today.
I assume most of them were VMware shops or are still running VMware, and I'm just kind of curious, the VMware zealots, were they converted? Do they curse it out? I mean, how is that from an admin point of view rolling out?
So I think, Adam, you were old VMware. Who else is VMware before? Let me see. Let's see here.
Yeah, Howard, we were a big VMware shop prior to moving to Azure Stack. So we definitely, like Adam mentioned earlier, there were a lot of features we really just didn't utilize, and it seemed like we were making this investment year over year in VMware for really no good, compelling reason. They were always we were just never taking advantage of the features that we were paying for ultimately. And we did know, based on some internal testing and some small scale testing, that Hyper-V had improved leaps and bounds from when we first used it in 2008 R2 to 2016 is the first one we actually went to server 2016. So definitely something that, looking back on it, everybody on the team really enjoyed the move to it, and it's just simplified our entire workflow just because it's familiar tools that everybody's used to working with. Even if you don't necessarily utilize Windows Admin Center or whatever, and you just use the traditional tools that have always been there, that's an easy learning curve. There's not a whole lot of complex technology to learn to manage the system. So, and then with Windows Admin Center, making it that much easier and being a little, we use it probably in a different way than a lot of people, but being able to use Windows Admin Center anywhere the way we have it set up is really nice, and the integration you get with Azure AD for securing the environment as well. So it's just a lot of positive things to say about it, but really have zero regrets moving from VMware. I'm actually really happy that we did.
And your environment of 32,000 kids is not that small. People yelling at you. It's a school district, Atlanta. So, your 32,000 kids, they can't get access. Trust me, there'll be a lot of parents will be yelling at you.
Yeah, we know about it very quick if there's something that's down. So, and this has been one of the most stable platforms we've ever implemented. So definitely I'm proud to say that for sure.
Yeah, even with that, I think Microsoft recognized management is a very critical piece, as if they want to attract new people, right? Because ease of use, management, single GUI, single platform, and we haven't even got to the topic of Arc, right? I think ability for Microsoft from Azure. So Windows Admin Center is a single cluster management where you can manage your cluster on a single cluster basis, right? Whereas Azure Arc is a multi-cluster, multi-cloud management where Microsoft said, because now your Azure services, I can see everything, right? I could see all your cluster, the health of your cluster. If you have 20 sites, which many of our customers has multiple sites across their edge, right? You can see all of them in a single point of view from Azure Arc, and they continue to enhance that capability with VM and everything else. I think the future is just really bright if they continue down this innovation path of leveraging this hybrid cloud capability and do a multi-cloud management. Right. I think for us is that we're in the cusp of a new technology. Technology continue to change, and when I was at the event, it's funny when I mention a technology, people don't understand it. But when I mention the word Azure, people go, "Oh yeah, we're in Azure." right? To me, that's the entry point, right? Ability for them to say, hey, you're in Azure, can you take advantage of some of the services you run in Azure on-prem, right? Whether or not it's Kubernetes, whether or not it's VDI, whatever it is. Trust me, whatever services today Microsoft have at Azure, they could decide to let you run it on-premise or connect to it. That's exactly their value prop and selling point. I think that's the direction that they want to go, and that's the direction I believe will be a very competitive differentiator. Okay. Any other question from the audience? I see a lot of new customers too here. Do you have any questions for our speakers, our guests, our customers? Brian? Okay. Brian, you have a lot of videos. Thank you for everything, and we'll get all those published, and I'm sure everybody will be watching it. I'm looking forward to the report where you'll say Microsoft is the best thing since sliced bread. Probably not, yeah. but you know, looking forward to that report and see what we could do. Anyone using ASR? Yeah, I think actually many people use ASR. I think Ryan is. I think Adam's gonna do that next year. I would say a good 20% of our customer uses ASR. They have a VM, they provision to ASR. That critical VM's a SQL. They have it as a DR. Right. That's what they're doing. And actually, Henry actually did an ASR implementation for one of our customer FTSI in Texas 2 years ago. So that's something we have knowledge of, Sean. So happy to help as we get there. Okay. Thank you very much, everybody, for joining this virtual meetup. We're at the end of the hour. Thank you, Adam, for spending time with us. Thank you for sharing experience. Thank you, Brian, for joining. Thank you for all of you guys. Stay safe, stay healthy, and looking forward to chatting with every one of you and visiting you guys face to face when I get to your city. All right. Thank you so much.
Bye, all. Thank you.
Talk to you soon.